Hello and welcome to this episode of the Maryland Risk Management Education Podcast. My name is Paul Geringer and I'm the Extension Legal Specialist here in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics at the University of Maryland. And welcome back to this new episode of the podcast, where today we're going to look at some issues I probably have talked about on here before, but I wanted to bring attention to it again because it is an important topic and it's something many of you struggle with from time to time and often ask me questions about. Specifically, sometimes when it comes to the context of how to pick, an attorney to start working on your estate plan. But I often get many requests for people on, attorneys to hire. And one of the things I often have to point out is it's not an easy process to pick out an attorney. I just can't give you a name. You really do need to figure out who you work best with. And if it's something you've never done before, figuring out what attorney you work best with, it may be a difficult area for you to get started in. You may not want to do it. You may try to put it off, but it is something that after we sit down and think about it, it's not that hard to do. It just requires a little bit of extra work on everyone's part and just doing a little bit of interviewing to figure out who you work best with and who is going to work best with you. So it focused in on just article I put together recently for the American Agriculturist, and that's where the source of this is coming from, and I'll provide a link to it in the show notes. But, as I've talked about just a minute ago, selecting an attorney to represent you is not always an easy prospect, especially if it's your first time needing legal help. You may not know how to find the right attorney for your needs or what questions to ask. Selecting the right attorney and understanding expectations on both sides will hopefully lead to a successful attorney-client relationship. As you can probably guess, not all attorneys are the same, and you will have to do some basic research to narrow your list down. So the first thing we need to talk about is how do you go about finding an attorney? The first question you might, as I just said, you might ask yourself is, how do I find attorneys to talk to? One good place to start is you can always start with your state bar association. The state bar listing may allow you to narrow down that search to attorneys who practice in specific areas. Another way to find attorneys specializing in the field of law you need help in is to go through professional associations. For example, if you need an ag attorney, you can always turn to the American Agricultural Law Association. It's a national professional organization with attorneys who practice in the field of ag law. They may be able to help you come up with a list of attorneys in your state. The other thing you can look at is, does your state bar have, a specialized group that deals with the area? So if it's estate planning, there may be an estates and trust section that you could look at attorneys in. If it's more closely related to something on the farm, there may be an ag law section. Maryland has one of those, so it maybe has both of those actually. So it may be an area you want to turn to look at. The other area may be environmental law, so you may have to look at one of those as well. You can also talk to friends, neighbors, those you work with about attorneys they may have used and how the experience was. If they know any attorneys on your list, ask them whom they would use. Just ask those basic questions. It's a good way to get an idea of who to use. Once we get this list developed, then we got to think about, how do we interview these attorneys? You could talk to them. Actually, I say you should talk to them about how you expect your case to be handled, how will you get updates, how will you be billed, as well as payments. If you have never hired an attorney before, you may have some initial fears. Interviewing the attorney and getting a feel for how the process will work will ease many of those concerns. You'll have a better understanding of what you're going to expect walking into the field. Always ask about payment and billing because this can vary depending on the attorney and the issue. It's essential to you to understand what the attorney will charge you in order to eliminate surprises when you get the first bill. Plus, it will help you know if you can afford the attorney. For simple matters like estate planning, title opinions, things like that, it may just be a flat fee you get billed by the attorney. For more complicated issues, you may pay a retainer with the attorney charging you an hourly rate. And if, which would change if the case goes to trial, there may be differing levels understand all this early on so you get a sense of what to expect, especially when you get the bill. It will make it much easier for you to understand how that bill is going to operate. The other thing to take into account is, we all communicate differently. So make sure you understand how the attorney will communicate with you. You may prefer phone calls. You may prefer text messages. You may prefer short emails. Ask questions early on how they will communicate with you and how often you will receive updates. Understanding how you and the attorney will talk to each other will also help your attorney, when asking you for additional information, such as documents or responses to questions. Get a sense early on of how well you two communicate together and what that's going to do. You may think all attorneys can handle any legal problem you present to them, but this is not always the case. Many attorneys will focus in on specific areas of law, such as environmental law, taxes, succession planning, and bankruptcy. During the interview, ask the attorney if he or she typically handles cases like yours. Ask for the attorney's track record in similar cases, wins, losses, settlement record. Just get a sense of how if they've handled cases like yours. This should not be really a determining factor, but it can help you understand the types of cases and clients the attorney handles typically. See if they're up to date on the issues. Consider, following up by asking the attorney's professional associations specializing in the area of law that you may have the concern in may require the attorney to keep up on the latest developments in the field. If we're looking at succession planning, estate planning, it's going to require keeping up with changes in tax law. It may require other updates as well. Every area of law is going to require keeping up with some updates. Professional associations such as the American Bar Association, a state bar association, professional association focused in on the areas such as I mentioned earlier, the American Ag Law Association, or any association in the local area. Those can be one way that attorneys can try to keep up with the latest developments. There may be others. It's a way you want to sit down and talk to them about what's going on and making sure they understand what these developments are. Being a member of a professional association can be one way to determine if the attorney is keeping abreast of changes in that area of expertise. It may help you better understand if they're going to be able to handle your case or if they haven't had experience in your case. Ask about past clients. Have them describe their typical client. This is an important question that many people forget to ask. When specializing in a law field, attorneys may only represent one type of client, such as corporations or large businesses. They may not have experiences working with smaller family-owned businesses. That's not always the case. They may work only with plaintiffs. They may only work with defendants on the case as well. They may have a mix of clients, but they may only represent typically one side. They may not represent the other side. It may be one way that they at least try to stay balanced in what they do and not appear to be playing both sides. It just depends on the attorney and the law firm as to what they normally do. By asking this question, you get a sense of the type of client the attorney typically handles, and it will help you understand if they will be a person that can handle you well. How would they handle your case? That's another question you should think about asking. An attorney who regularly practices in the area of law you're seeking help should have no problem discussing how they might manage your case, based on the facts you presented them. For example, if your request involves an environmental contamination, then the attorney may want to consult experts they regularly use to establish a defense or to establish, what's going on in the case. The attorney may also generically discuss the steps and how the case will proceed. It all depends on, how they've handled these cases and what they think is important, but this will help you get a sense of what's going to go on in the field. Like I've said before, finding the right attorney is not a simple process. It's not simply going out and hiring the first attorney. It's going out, it's interviewing them, taking time to do research, understanding who can operate in the field that you need help in, and who you feel comfortable with. These are questions that I give you, and I always give people for starters. You should think about what you want to know when you walk into this situation, and you should ask additional follow-up questions. This will be one way to help you get a better sense of what's going on in your case and how your case will proceed. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can email me at lgoering@umd.edu, or you can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at aglawpaul. You can send me a message on there, put a comment on a post, and I'll get back with you. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.